Greetings, family. We are live. Welcome to the Sister Shanice Show. When you see me here live, you know it's Wisdom Wednesday. And as you can see, I have a very special guest in the house. I've just remembered, let me mute myself on YouTube as well. Otherwise, we will be getting echo coming through. Well, at least that tells me that we are indeed live. Well, as always, you know, looking forward to a great show with you today. I've got my special guest, Kwame Gonza, in the house. Welcome, beloved. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sister Shanice. I'm very happy to hear. I'm very excited. And I just want to tell the people who are out there watching for now, they should try and invite the next person, take the link and invite others into the channel, because what we are going to go through today is unbelievable. It's going to be a very special, the next 1 to 2 hours, which we are going to go through. We are going through 1,000 years of history and we are going to go through 1,000 years of history. 500 of that is going to be history, pure history, and 500 is going to be the future. We are going to take you 500 years into the future. So that is what we are looking at today, on this program. So it's going to be nothing like you've never been, to before, or nothing like you've never seen before. Invite others, take the link and invite others and be part of this that we are going to show you today. It's an exciting new future that we are looking at as Africans and young Africans specifically, because we think that the continent and our people globally have been driven into a wall whereby we are not moving forward and we are just stuck and they are killing us from one position. So we have decided to charter a new way and in a new position so that we can move in a different direction. So this is what we are going to look at. 1,000 years of history, 500 pure history, and 500 years into the future. That is what we are navigating today. And it's going to be, exciting more than you've never seen before. So invite others immediately right now.
Thank you so much. I am excited already, really looking forward to the show. I'm just posting as we speak, beloved. And so please, everybody that's already in the house, kindly do, be posting the link out there so that we can be joined by our family as our brother Kwame Gonza has already told us we've got an exciting, fantastic, blacktastic show lined up for you today, and we want everyone to be part of it. You spoke about some of the challenges that we have as a people and family. Wow, I mean, there's so much that's been exposed in the paper right now. I am just blown away. I mean, it was just today I got sent a video which was laying out, it was a news report by one of these American channels. Let me see if I can find my notes on it. By one of these American channels, and they was actually talking about, the wealth of the vice president of Equatorial New Guinea. Oh my days. This is the vice president is the son of the president, the current president of that country. And this president has been in power for something like 44 years. The president, Theodora Nguma, has been...
Obiang Nguema. So he has the same, he has actually the same name like the one who has been, yes. Yeah. I think this one is called Bryce Nguema, the one in Gabon.
Yes.
And the one in Equatorial Guinea is called Obiang Nguema. It's just because the African people are the same, and these countries are at the neighborhood. So it will not surprise you that they are from the same tribe. Possibly, they are from the same tribe. Of course, this is Africa.
First and foremost, before any tribe, we're all Africans, we're all one people. And this is a message that we have to get across to the entire African continent. I know, we have been divided for centuries on so-called tribal lines or based on our clan or our nation, but going forward, we really absolutely must see ourselves as one, irrespective of religion, whether you're Muslim, Christian, atheist, Pan-Africanist, whatever your background. First and foremost, first and foremost, as a people, we are Africans, and we have to come together united on that basis. And we have to have some principles, some code of conduct. When our people get to a position of powers and influence, and when they have access to money, especially if they're in a leadership position, they need to know that that money belongs to the people, not to them. So as I'm saying in this report today on this, what was this news channel, MSNBC, some American news channel, they were talking about the wealth of the vice president of Ecuador. In fact, they just touched on it. They showed one of his houses, which is a $30 million mansion in Malibu, California. He also is the owner of Michael Jackson's glove. You know, that white glove that had all of the jewels encrusted in it when he did his live video and his moonwalk? This vice president bidded obviously at an auction and got that glove. He's also got so many high-end cars, and one of them cost $3 million. I mean, this is the money that belongs to the people. And who are the people? The poorest of the African, one of the poorest of the African countries, all live, you know, large percentage living below the poverty line. One of the countries that they talk about living on less than $2 a day, yet is rich in oil. And the money is going into the pockets of the president, his family. You know, we've been hearing about these sorts of levels of corruption, Brother Kwame, for a long time, but now it seems it's being exposed, and we're getting the detail, and we are seeing and we are hearing how these presidents and their children are actually spending the money. This president who's been in power for 44 years and has lined up his son as the vice president, who is behaving and conducting himself in a totally immoral and absolutely, you know, unacceptable way, abusing the public funds. You know, I'll come back with what I think needs to happen. But Brother Kwame, what have you got to say about this revelation?
Yeah, Sister Shanice, is very depressing to some extent when you listen to it. The country has been plundered. But what you don't want to forget is that there is an imperialist hand behind. This is a country now, 10 years ago, which was less than 1 million people. Currently, the country is close to 1.5 million people. I could give you the GDP of the country, you know, per capita is around 18,000, is richer than some countries, even in Europe. But it would not surprise you that people, you know, are poor. People are, you know, are very, very poor in the country, which is less than 1.5 million people. This has been going on. This robbery has been going on, and since, you know, long time, that the president even took his son, is the vice president. The one you are talking about is the vice president. Theodore Obiang Nguema Mbasogo is the president. That is the name. And then Theodore Obiang Mbagwe is the vice president. He is the son of the president. Actually, he dated Eve, the rapper, EVE, the rapper. He has dated EVE, the rapper, before, and he bought that house in Malibu. So even to the extent that the United States went ahead to seize that house, actually, and took it over, because they were claiming that he engaged in some sort of money laundering and all that, and he left all those things there, the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, all those types of cars. But these are the problem. When you look on the other side of
money, let me just interject there, because you know, the Americans have a way of, you know, seizing people's properties. That what they need to now do is to determine who that money belonged to and return it to its rightful owners. The rightful owners of that funds are the
they don't do that.
Equatorial New Guinea, and these leaders that are embezzling government funds, that are stealing government funds and spending it on their own personal, you know, exuberance, they need to be charged. They need to be imprisoned. All their funds need to be seized, and it needs to go back to the people where it should have gone to in the first place. All these African governments, where there's evidence that they are living above, the salary that they're given to do the job that they are meant to be doing, need to account for their money. I mean, I was hearing in another video that the former president of Gabon, Omar Bongo, he had 70 bank accounts.
Yeah, Ali Bongo. He was called Ali Bongo, and I think his father is the one who was called Omar Bongo. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Omar Bongo.
The father. Yes. So all these, they are like dynasties.
70 bank accounts when he died. And
yes.
Ali Bongo, the son, is walking in his father's footsteps with his behavior. And his son has been walking in his father and his grandfather's footsteps, to the extent where we saw those suitcases packed with money, estimated to be millions. Again, funds that belong to the people of Gabon. Well, apparently he's been arrested now. The military have arrested him for, those treason attacks. And, he certainly needs to, what do you think needs to happen to these presidents, presidents and their family members that are embezzling the funds from the people? You're on the ground in Africa. Your people have been denied all of these services. The hospitals are not getting upgraded. The education facilities are suffering. People are dying because they're not getting the health treatment and everything that they need. What do you think ought to happen to these embezzling presidents that have got no morals or scruples?
Yeah, Sister Shanice, there is problems. These problems, you cannot understand them if you don't understand how the global systems work. Nkrumah came and analyzed these problems in his book called the Class Struggle in Africa. And Nkrumah connected very well how these problems are operating, and even today you can see them. You can look at the global multinational companies, the country you started with, for example, Equatorial Guinea, where President Obiang, Nguema Mbasogo is. You see that there is Chevron is over there drilling for oil. So you can see that there is the presence of the United States in there. Now they have interests in Equatorial Guinea of drilling the oil. They have been benefiting from this oil. And even if you start calculating how much they have been drilling and giving some of the proceeds to the government, because they are the ones who give the government what it is using, because now this is an oil producing company and spends, and spends most of its budget from oil, from the oil money, the money which is coming from oil, supports its budget from money which is coming from oil. So you can see that there's a connection between the multinational companies from the metropolis in New York and in London and in Paris and in Brussels, and then with these corrupt people. Now, when they are operating like this for 40 years in government, these foreign governments are supporting them. You talk of the United States has been supporting them. It supports them and looks the other way when they are carrying out all these corruption activities, and even buying these mansions in Miami and buying them in London and Paris. And
what would you want to see happen?
Yes. So what we've understood is that these are major structural problems, and how to attack them, we have to take over the whole African continent. And these are some of the solutions which I'm coming to present in our presentations. That we have understood that however much challenging the situation is, we have to face it, because our ancestors have faced much more challenging situations. So we have to take that responsibility to be able to solve it, because if you don't pay attention to the whole continent, then you are going to be swallowed while you are not aware that you are being swallowed. If you stay in Zimbabwe, for example, and you don't pay attention to what is happening in Guinea, we are on the same landmass. And this is what Nkrumah noticed, in the 60s, and realized that, when he made a statement and said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation and unification of Africa. This is what Nkrumah meant. that if you sit in Zimbabwe and claim that you are free when the people in Equatorial Guinea are not free and are being exploited, or there's a military base in Equatorial Guinea, then you are lying to yourself in Zimbabwe. Right now, we have AFRICOM, a military base of the United States in Zambia, which is close to Zimbabwe. So if you don't pay attention to what is happening in Zambia, then you are in a trap. So what we have realized is that we have to take on the whole continent instead of taking on regional countries. So this is what we are fighting for. And these are some of the solutions which we are looking at, that they work, what President Nkrumah's daughter calls the unfinished business, which is the unification and reconstruction of Africa. Yes. Has not been done, has been neglected for a long time. So that is what we have come to do, that all these chaotic groups that are stealing from the continent, both the foreign and internal, which Nkrumah already identified in his book, Class Struggle in Africa, because he identified those foreign groups and the internal corrupting groups. They are working together in stealing from the African people. So this is the very example. What you are mentioning right now is the very naked example of, you know, this kind of robbery that is going on. And while African people don't have access to hospital, they don't have medicines in the hospitals, the roads are bad, you know, the schools are bad. So all these, we understand that there's only one way to solve this problem, and that is to unify the African continent and rebuild it, you know, at once, all at once, marshal all the African resources so that the foreigners can stop stealing these resources, as we have seen in Niger. They have been stealing Niger's uranium because Africans are not paying attention. Other Africans have decided to lock themselves in small countries and claim that they are okay, they are free. They lock themselves in Ghana and say they are free. They don't want to pay attention to what is happening in Niger. Now, what is happening there is robbery. These people are robbing, you know, the country and taking the resources to France. So even when you go to Gabon, we looked at Gabon. It has been producing oil for the last, you know, 40 years. But when you look at only the production for the last 20 years, starting from 2000, you know, you calculate for only 20 years of production, it has produced oil worth only oil. You don't put agriculture, you don't put, you know, the fishing, you don't put all the other things. It has produced oil which is worth $105 billion. $105 billion. Now, this is an economy which is in the tune of around, I think, $20 billion. So you ask, where has all the rest of the money gone? Even if you were getting at least half of that $105 billion, you should have an economy, you know, which is close to $60 billion. This is only from oil. But this is a country which we hear that is receiving handouts from IMF, you know, a country with this much wealth just for the last 20 years that has been dug out. Now, what do we have there? We have a company like Total in Gabon is extracting immense value from the ground and taking it to France and enriching. The French people are going on vacations. You know, the African people cannot even afford a simple drug, a simple Panadol, a simple, you know, paracetamol in the hospitals. These are problems. Yet France is conniving with a certain group of people to extract the resources, and they are being allowed to steal the value from the African people. So this, again, is the classical example of what Nkrumah explained in Class Struggle in Africa. That book is free. You can Google it and read it to be able to understand Africa's predicament and situation. And of course, this situation is similar to what is happening in other parts of the global south, because the global north has positioned itself as an eternal parasite that is supposed to feed onto these nations. Even when you look at Latin America for the last 50 years, I mean, for the last 150 years and 200 years, you know, it has been exploiting. And that is why you see that there's this friction between the United States and Venezuela and Cuba, because these people are resisting the exploitation. Now, the option for them is to be demonized. They say they are respecting democracy and all these. Of course, the normal demonizing of the of the global north. That is how they operate once you don't want to be exploited. So what we are experiencing can only be overcome because it's duplicated. It is duplicated all over, even if you go to South Africa. It's the same mod operandi that exploitation. You have a group of people within have been planted there as, you know, overseers, plantation overseers, the same model of slavery that you had a group of a few blacks they are put on the plantation to oversee, and then you exploited the rest and the work as slaves. So the model is the same from slavery, colonialism, and now to the neo-colonialism which we are in right now. So the only solution for us is to strap ourselves up, put on our boots and thicken our skin and go all out and start struggling to see how we can unify the continent and eject all of them who have been exploiting the continent. And this is not going to be an easy walk in the park. It's not going to be a walk in the park, but we have to do it. We have to do it because we don't have any option. We have to give the next generation a better continent. This generation that is going of heads of state, like if you look at them at the African Union, they have not given us a better continent. They have given us a continent where our brothers and sisters are falling in the oceans, and there's no reason why our people should be dying in the Mediterranean Ocean. So this is the continent they have given us, a chaotic continent, subjugated continent. So now we have a responsibility of giving the next generations a better continent. Now we cannot do that if we just sit down and fold our hands. So this is the solution which we are working on as the new group of Africans and a group of new leaders that are coming on board the continent.
Well, thanks for the reassurances there for the future, because if these leaders have their way, their children and their children's children will be continuing to run those African countries from now well into the future. And so time for change is now. Those of us in the diaspora, we've been hearing, for decades about the exploitation on the continent. We've also been hearing about corruption. We've been hearing allegations that have been made against the leaders and people in leadership position who have been stealing the country's resources. But what the coup has done, the coup has made us really home in on individual African countries. It's made us hone in on the leaders and who they are. And it's made us get to know them by name, by character, their family, who they're married to. And what we are seeing from the diaspora is a very toxic culture of corruption that has gone unchallenged for far too long. Africa is not poor, Africa is poorly managed. And we have allowed characters who we describe as having a treasonous nature and a treasonous spirit among them. These are individuals who have sworn to run the country on behalf of the people, but instead are stealing and thieving the country's resources and have been doing so for too long without any prosecution or fear of prosecution. These are people who have totally neglected their population, totally neglected the country, spend vast amounts of their own time outside of the country. So they don't even care about the roads and the hospitals and the education system. They have hardly invested in these countries and its infrastructure at all. As you know, I do a radio show on the Big G Galaxy Afri, and earlier on the show, we had callers calling in and making their suggestions about what we think ought to happen with those to those leaders who are embezzling and frauding the country of its resources. And we're saying that they and their family members all need to be prosecuted. All their bank accounts need to be frozen, the money confiscated, those funds returned to the country, because it's money that belongs to the country, and that money needs to then be invested into the schools and the infrastructure, etc., where it ought to be going. And we even had callers calling in as far as saying some of these people ought to be flogged for every dollar that they've stolen. They should be every dollar they should be flogged for, and they need to be imprisoned for life. You see, we have to take action.
You know what will surprise you?
Yeah,
Sister
before
Shanae,
you
sorry
come in, beloved, before you come in, because I know you're ready to flow, okay? I'm going to go to the audience, because I haven't even welcomed the audience as yet, okay? But we will be coming back to you, and I'll be handing over the floor to you. You know how we do. I just want to rise up everybody in the chat. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Apologies for the delay in coming over to the chat, but as you can hear, you know, we are already having the conversation about some of the challenges that Africa is facing today. What are you, my beloved audience? How would you suggest that we deal with some of these leaders and we deal with the problems of corruption in these countries? Yenge Mimpa Kiambote, beloved Mudele, welcome, our Congo leopard, welcome to the house. Want to rise up, Brother Lincoln in the house as well. Hotep, Mahat Hotep to you, beloved brother. Yes, Mundele, great to have you in the house and for tuning in today. And bringing your spiritual orientation with you. We rise you up. And, you know, you're saying that Kagame is probably richer than Obang Unguma. At least Obang Unguma does not have a Holocaust involving non-nationals of Uganda and Rwanda attached to their spoils. Yes, indeed. And this is a part of history that we will never be able to forget. We have to learn from it, but we must never forget how far some of these leaders are prepared to go to hold on to power. But what we're saying now is enough is enough. Earlier today, I got a phone call from a beloved brother who was telling me about the situation in Cameroon. And as we all know, there's been a war, a senseless war in Cameroon that has been fought for decades now. And a pastor, you know, happened to talk about the problem and condemn the problem, you know, that was happening in the Cameroon at his service 2 days ago. And yesterday they found him floating in the river. He had been murdered. And this is what is happening now in the Cameroon to ordinary people who dare speak up and speak out about what's going on. Brothers are killing brothers, you know, murdering each other. And as our brother beloved said, there is, of course, the hidden hand in the background that are fueling these proxy wars. But we are the ones who are committing the murders, family. You know, in the name of Francophone and Anglophone, languages that are not even African languages, for heaven's sake. Mandela is reminding us that Tony Blair and Geldof actually own gold mines as well in the DRC Congo. That needs to be denounced as well. Enough is enough. Katrina, you're right. Somehow we need to unify the continent, and we can only unify on the basis of what we have in common. And that is our melanin, the fact that we are one African people. And we have to remember, before religion, before Anglophone, before being a Francophone, before being a Jollof or a Wolof or a Mandinka or any other tribe, first and foremost, we are Africans. Yeah, just like the Chinese recognize that first and foremost they are Chinese, just like the Indians recognize that first and foremost they are Indians, just like the Europeans, the Caucasians recognize first and foremost they are Caucasians, and they know how to stick together as a people. We have got to get to that level. Rise Up Chris Jones talking about, he's laughing at the fact that Geldof has gold mines. You know, it's not a laughing matter. We've seen, you know, the impact that it has on the children of that region as well. And so, yes, we're being reminded that, you know, the Band-Aid of the 80s and the one more recently as well, ripped off Africa. They're all ripping off Africa. You can't turn on the Tell Live Vision here in Europe or America without seeing adverts of these Caucasians begging for money. They don't give the money to Africa, so they're begging for money for themselves. They're constantly begging for money in the name of Africa. I even just watched a video of a laboratory somewhere, probably on the continent, where they are germinating millions of mosquitoes that they're planning to let loose in the African country. Who knows what sickness and diseases these mosquitoes are going to be bringing. We have to do, as our brother on Galaxy today rang in and said, but Nana Bonsu said, we have to invest in weapons of mass defense. We have to defend ourselves from these crazy professors and these lunatics who are out there with this depopulation agenda, who hate us as Africans, but want our resources and want to commit genocide using their new modifications, their weapons, new weapons of mass destruction. These are serious times. Sister Afridiamo in the house, rise yourself up. Brother Richmond in the house, rise yourself up. Sheriff Tess, it's been a little while. Good to have you in the house as well. Katrina, to everybody who's in the house, we welcome you. But, you know, without further ado, I want to allow our special guest to let go with his presentation today. So let me just briefly introduce to you our beloved brother Kwame Gonza, who is a Pan-Africanist, a mechanical engineer, director of Operations Connect Africa. He is a phenomenal individual within the community. He's the pioneer of the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan, which aims to connect the whole of Africa, the whole of the African continent. So we are delighted to have our beloved brother on board. Join us for this phenomenal powerhouse discussion and conversation that we are going to be having on the show today with our brother Kwame Gonza. Brother Kwame, I'm going to allow you to take it away. Give you an hour if you need all of that time, but do leave some time for Q&A. You're going to take us on a journey. I know that. Take it away, beloved brother.
Sister Shannon, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is, like I mentioned to all those who are watching right now, try and invite other people right now. Take your phone, take your computer, send the link and invite other people so that they can join the channel immediately. Those people you normally connect with and are not available right now, try and invite them, because we are going to take you through a marathon of 1,000 years of history. 500 of those is going to be pure history, and 500 is going to be the future, where we want to take the African continent. And we will talk about a lot of things, even some of the things Sister Shanice has mentioned, such as the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. We will talk about it at the end and how we want to implement such solutions. But we will look through the history and we'll take you, all the way to where we are right now and into the future, 500 years. So let's get it done immediately. Sister Shanice, I'm trying to share this. I hope.
Yes, it's up on the screen now, beloved. Okay. Take it away. I'm going to be posting behind the screen, behind the scenes as well.
Okay.
As you have asked.
All right. Thank you so much, Sister Shanice, for this opportunity once again. I don't take this opportunity for granted to present to our people what we think is the solution from our side, as we are seeing the things that are going on the global stage. So we've called this a historical resilience of the African people, the next phase of African liberation and reconstruction, because Nkrumah said that we have to liberate ourselves. When we liberate ourselves, then we consolidate that liberation so that it can be strong through unity, and then we will be able to reconstruct the African continent through a plan which we'll call the Rapid Africa Transformation Plan. In this, Sister Shanice has already introduced me. My name is Kwame Gonza. I'm the Director of Operations of Connect Africa. I've featured on SABC News of South Africa, different channels in Ethiopia, called Oromia Broadcasting Network. In Ghana, I have been to TV Africa in Ghana, and a couple of other TVs in Nigeria. All these trying to comment about the African continent and how we should take it forward. I'm a student of Kwame Nkrumah. I read Nkrumah's work, and I'm a big follower of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So I ask you once again, invite other people immediately so that we can take this on a marathon rapidly. So What we are going to go through today is the African history of struggle for freedom, and we will see where we are today in relation to that history. We will see also where the world is in relation to Africa. Where's Africa is, where is Africa, and in relation to where the world is, and where is the world in relation to Africa. So this is what we are also going to look forward. History, we spoke about history, or we are going to speak about history in the beginning because of how important, it is to look at patterns in history and be able to determine what is going to be happening in the future. History is made by people, and people's behaviors, they really don't change. That is why those who read history are able, even sometimes, or in many cases, to predict the future. So we are going to use history to predict the future. As you have seen in some of the writings of Honorable Marcus Garvey, he spoke about a tree which lacks roots. If you don't have roots and you don't know your history, it is unlikely that you have any future, or you will have any future. Now, the third part is we will look at the way forward for Africa, which we have called the Rapid Africa Transformation Plan. This is the plan that we are proposing that will be able to take Africa into the next, generation, or give Africa an advantage or a leap forward into the next generation from what we are currently going through, because we believe that the current structure cannot be able to transform the Africa that we want for the future, because it is so attached to the neo-colonial structure, is so attached to the colonial structures that it is very difficult. If you look at countries which have transformed themselves, they had to detach themselves from that colonial structure, especially those countries which were colonized. You can talk of China, you can even speak of, the countries like, Singapore, and all the others who have been able to transform their societies, even North Korea. They were able to detach themselves from the neo-colonial or the colonial structure in order to be able to transform their countries rapidly. Now, my presentation is going to be based on basically the works of C.L.R. James, who has written a book called The Black Jacobins. C.L.R. James was some sort of advisor to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. When Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was coming to England or the United Kingdom from the United States on his way to Ghana, back to Ghana, C.L.R. James actually is the one who gave Dr. Kwame Nkrumah directions or a letter of introduction to George Padmore. All these men, George Padmore and C.L.R. James, were both from the Caribbean. Now, Nkrumah had to be introduced to these African diasporas for him to be guided. In one book called The Political and Social Thought of Kwame Nkrumah, which was written by a lady called Ama Baini, she said that George Padmore was some sort of mentor to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He was a mentor to Nkrumah, that he always guided him on what to say, especially when he had just taken government. He was his advisor on African affairs. Okay, so he's the one who made Nkrumah's, political and economic policy in the interim when they were governing before George Padmore would die. Now, I will base also my analysis on Kwame Nkrumah, the two men, C.L.R. James and Kwame Nkrumah, and we will look at a couple of books at the end which they wrote, that these books are predictive of the future in one way or another. If you look at people like C.L.R. James, he mentioned in the book, The Black Jacobins, that the Africans, when they were struggling in Haiti, and they were also struggling for freedom against this slavery, the colonialists never thought that they would be able to win. So they undermined them. They looked down on them. And so France and Britain, for example, continued to fight against each other. And so they repeated this even during the 1940s, 1944, 1945. So they repeated the same thing. So C.L.R. James writes in his book and says, they did this and they are likely to do the same thing in the future. So this was the prediction we said C.L.R. James. And he said that when they do this in the future, again, the Africans will take advantage of it to be able to liberate themselves. So that is a predictive message that is written in that book, The Black Jacobins, if you read it very well. Now, I will look at Dr. Kwame Nkrumah also. He's written, I think, one of, in all our ancestors, there's no one who has a very huge body.
Oh, my brother, you've frozen. Hopefully he will be back with us very, very soon. Want to rise up C.L.R. James as advisor to Kwame Nkrumah. It just goes to show how important it is, that relationship between the diaspora and our brothers and sisters on the continent. Okay, you're back now. You froze for a little while, beloved, but you're back with us.
Okay. I hope you can hear me very well. Please, when did you hear me last?
Sorry?
When did you hear me last?
Oh, okay. You've only been gone for about less than a minute. And, I was just filling in and just talking about the importance of the relationship between the diaspora and our brothers and sisters on the continent and how.
Absolutely. Yes. So Nkrumah has been also able to do a lot of work. He wrote more than 21
Oh, yes. Where you got to, I just remembered, he was talking about the predictive message in the book.
Yes.
So if we read it, he was predicting that circumstances would happen again in the future. Yeah.
Yes. So these books are very important. The history, like C.L.R. James, predicted that some things will happen. The patterns would, manifest again. That the colonialists would fight again, and Africans would watch them and take advantage of this. And when we come to people like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah also, he did a lot of work. He wrote more than 21 books and pamphlets. In these books, he gave us the guidance on how to go forward, analyze for us the situations so that we can be able to understand the society in which we live in, and then we could be able to confidently face the challenges that are before us. In one message which he gave when he was in Guinea, after he had been removed from government illegally in Ghana, Nkrumah mentioned that I'm confident. I'm in the knowledge that death can never extinguish the torch I've lit in Ghana and Africa. And he said that long after I'm gone, I know that the torch which I have lit will continue to guide, will continue to give guidance to all people. So what he was talking about is the works which he left behind. Like I mentioned, he left behind more than 21 books and pamphlets. And I was mentioning that of all the ancestors, actually, I've not seen somebody who left behind a huge body of work such as Nkrumah. And all this was for us to be able to use it in the struggle, to continue the struggle forward. So these are the main upon which we are going to base our analysis as we go forward. Remember, I told you that we are going to look at three things. We are going to look at Africa through the history, through the lens of history, and we will look at today. We will look at the world and how it relates to Africa today, and then we will look into the future, how to go forward. Now, the importance of history. Why I wanted to emphasize it further, that history is able to predict the future. I'm going to look at one man here. He's called Ray Dalio. He's an investor. Ray Dalio is an investor in the United States. He's one of the richest men. He runs the biggest hedge fund in the world, which is up to $160 billion. It's more than $160 billion. He himself is around worth than $20 billion. So he uses the strategy of studying history. He bases his understanding of history. He bases on his understanding of history to be able to invest and and become rich. So we want to see what he is talking about for the future, and how he's talking about also history and how it is determining the future. So let's get to it immediately.
Ray Dalio is one of the most influential investors in the world today. He started his company, Bridgewater, out of his two-bedroom apartment in New York City in 1975, and has grown it into the world's largest hedge fund. Dalio is the author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, Principles, Life and Work, in which he shares a blueprint for success, personal and professional. Dalio is an active philanthropist and conservationist, with a special interest in ocean exploration and conservation.
I'm pleased to bring in our next guest, Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest and most profitable hedge fund firm. Ray is also a well-known philanthropist and an author of multiple books. Ray, it's great to have you with us.
So nice to be here.
So I mentioned at the top that you're an author of multiple books, and I know that you're writing one now called The Changing World Order, and you've been talking about three forces at play that were here pre-pandemic. Would love for you to share your worldview with our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I do research, and so this is a study that I've been doing, and then I decided to share it with people because I think it's so important. A number of years ago, first with 2008, we got into a monetary situation, of course, where we're printing money, creating a lot of debt, and monetizing it. And then populism emerged around the world.
Okay, we've lost the audio. We've lost the audio, beloved, and it looks as though our brother may have frozen again. So sincere apologies. As you know, he'll be right back as soon as he can. Looks as though the internet may have just dropped very briefly. Let me just check what the situation is over on the YouTube channel. Rise up, family. We'll be back with you. Our beloved brothers, as you can see, his internet has just slid down for a little while, but he is back with us. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Sister Shanice.
Okay, good, and I can hear you as well. We lost you mid-flow during that interview. Sometimes I have to wonder if it's my internet as well, but I think it's your end.
Okay. Yeah,
if it's my
probably
end, you just carry on. If it's my end, you just carry on. But
it could be my end. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it could be my end.
Okay, but carry on though. We're back. We're back together now. We're back on.
And the implications of that, which reverberate through the system in terms of all the markets and everything. The second is this conflict, this polarization, this wealth gap, and how we're at each other's throats. And I looked at the wealth gap, and I looked at a lot of measures of conflict going back in time, and I found that they were in the 1930 to 45 period. The printing of money, as I described, and debt monetization was also in the 1930 to 45 period. And the third big influence is the rise of China. So the rise of a great power, challenging an existing great power, the United States.
Now, I want our viewers to pay attention to the years he mentioned. He mentioned the 1930s to 1940s, and then he mentioned the rise of China. I want our people to pay close attention to those things, because I'm going to pick on those things and use them in the as I go forward. So he mentioned 1940s. 1940s, those were very important years. If you remember the Manchester Conference, the Pan-African, conference, I think it was the 50th Pan-African Congress, which was held in Manchester. It was held in 1945, in England. So that is a very important factor. And the other thing is the rise of China as a power. That is a very important also factor, which we are going to look at in relation to Africa's history also.
United States. And that has enormous implications. As an investor, I think what are the relative appeals of the markets, but it has a lot of implications. It's not just a trade war. So the markets and everything were reverberating the trade war, the technology war, the geopolitical war in Taiwan and the South China Seas, and then also the capital war. We're seeing that emerge. So those three factors required me to then go back in history. And I wanted to study the rises and declines of reserve currency empires. So I needed to go back far enough that I would have a few. So I had to go back 500 years so I could see the rise and decline of the Dutch Empire and its reserve currency, the rise and decline of the British Empire and its reserve currency, the rise and beginning of decline for the United States and its reserve currency, and China. And so those are the forces, and that's what I did, which you're referring to. And that, by the way, that's available for anybody to read on LinkedIn.
Now, thank you very much, those who are still with us. Like I said, invite other people so that we have not gone very far, so that we can get this, on. Now, from what he mentioned the importance of history. What I wanted to show you there is the importance of history. Do not let anyone ever tell you that history is not important, especially if you are an African. This history is very important. From when our empires ruled on the continent and when we had.
Oh, that looks like we've lost our brother again. Again, not sure if it's my end. Sincere apologies for the dropping out. He will be back with us very, very soon, I'm sure. So absolutely have to agree with our beloved. History is just so important because we can learn so much from our history, not only about how great we were in the past, but very importantly, where we went wrong in the past. And therefore, he's back with us. And therefore, the lessons that we need to learn from our past. Back over to you. Beloved.
Yes, our people will forgive me for the network. I cannot control it, and unfortunately.
I'm sure if you was in a leadership position, it would be a very high-speed network for everybody in the country. Africa is not poor, just poorly managed.
Yeah. So unfortunately, but what I wanted to emphasize was the.
Oh no, not again. Oh dear. You was just about to emphasize something for us, and then unfortunately we lost you. Please do bear with us. As we can see, we've got the challenges of liaising across the mountains, the valleys, the rivers, but our beloved is back with us.
Yes. So this importance of history, I think we have to emphasize it. Sister Shanice, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. We did lose you for a moment or two, but please continue about the importance of emphasizing our history.
Yes, it is very important. Now, I want to go through what I have called the modern emancipation timeline, or the modern African emancipation timeline. And in this, I broke it down through into 3 segments, from the first emancipation, second emancipation, and the third emancipation. Of course, there is many people who say Africa has been emancipated, even before this, in certain times when we were in Kemet. But that is why I specifically called it the modern African emancipation timeline. Starting from the year 1400, that is when Africa, of course, was invaded, and the first Africans were taken from the continent and taken overseas. Aside from the expeditions, of course, which we used to do with people like Mansa Musa. So I'm starting from that period. That time when we had the first emancipation is the one I called the Haitian Revolution, because the Africans in Haiti, or so-called San Domingo, the word San Domingo and Haiti, I will use it interchangeably here. They were able to fight.
We have a little break again. Let's hope that he's back with us very soon. Oh, he seems to have an unstable line. These are part of the challenges, family. Let me go over to the chat, see what's going on. Sheriff S, it's good to see you interacting in the chat. Brother Richmond, rise yourself up. Lady Henry's sister in Ghana, exploiting the people. I think we all need to know more about that as well. Yes, Sister Afrijamo, they are misleaders, not leaders. I need to refrain from calling them leaders, but calling them misleaders. Are you back with us, Brother Kwame?
Yes, I'm here, Sister
Please
Shanice.
continue. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what I was trying to say is that the first liberation of Africans happened in Haiti with the Haitian Revolution, which started from 1791 all the way to 1804, and it lasted for close to 13 years, or exactly 13 years when the war was going on. And these Africans with nothing, no businesses, no weapons of war, no special guns, were able to fight against 3 countries and defeat them. Starting with France, Britain came to want to re-enslave them and take over, and they fought against Britain. Spain wanted to come also and take over the colony, and they were able to win, emancipation. And contrary to what everyone tells you, that Britain helped to stop slavery, Britain did not stop slavery, but rather it was the Haitians, their defeat of France, because the French were warring with the British. If you remember, in 1776, America got its independence. Now, when it got its independence, the United States got its independence from Britain. Britain was jealousy of France, because the so-called San Domingo, or Haiti, which we know today, was the most profitable colony during that period in the 1700s, in the later part of the 18th century. You can go out and read these things in the book which I mentioned, The Black Jacobins of C.L.R. James. Now, Britain started warring with France. Now, our people, they noticed this. They saw a chance. And also during this period, France was also coming from the French Revolution, which brought, of course, Napoleon to power. A lot of people have been mentioning and talking about Napoleon, how he was a great general. But what they don't mention to you is that Africans in Haiti defeated him, because he sent a group of army soldiers to come there and fight the Africans, and they were defeated. They were absolutely defeated in Haiti. So they were fighting. Britain was fighting with France, because Britain used to sell the so-called slaves to France, and so Britain cut off France. Now they were warring and struggling for economic supremacy of the globe, like what we are seeing. Now this word the struggle for domination of the globe, we are going to hear it again and again and again. Even when we come to today, if you push it to today, you can hear that China is struggling with the United States over the domination of the world. Now, remember, I told you that the human behavior doesn't change. And so if you look into history, you can be able to predict what is going to happen. If you see certain patterns happening with the behavior of humans, you can be able to predict what is happening and what is going to happen next and next and next and the next day. So you can be able, even in some cases, to predict it precisely. That is why I played for you the short video of Ray Dalio trying to inform us on the importance of history and how he uses history to invest for himself and be able to make huge profits on his investments because of history. Now, when we come to the second emancipation, I'll run through this very quickly. The second emancipation came through in 1945, after almost 73 years of slavery from 1884. Remember, when Africans defeated slavery, they went back and instituted another system in 1884, the so-called colonialism. And they came and brutalized the Africans. If you remember, in the Congo, more than 20 million people, died. All these things which they have been using to tell the African diaspora that Africans on the continent, they sold you, which are lies, because the white man doesn't want to take responsibility. they are just lies, because what happened is that when you go back to the continent, what remained in the continent was the same brutality that they were inflicting on the people on the continent. The same brutality that was being inflicted on those who were taken is the same brutality that was being inflicted on the people who were on the continent, actually. So in the Congo alone, over 20 million people were killed. In Namibia alone, over 10 million people. The Nama and the Herero of Namibia, Germany was over there massacring these people and killing them, over 10 million people. So never believe what the white man is telling you, that Africans, they sold their friends. It was his business, and he tries to bury it down. Now, in the second emancipation, people struggled against colonialism, which had lasted for almost 73 years. But if you look carefully, you will see that in the first emancipation, there was a struggle which lasted for 13 years. But before Africans would make a breakthrough, it had been almost 400 years. It was a very long period from 1400 to 1800 when the first emancipation came. Now, that was 400 years. But during the colonialism, it lasted for a shorter period from 1885 or 1884 to 1957, when the Gold Coast got its independence. That period, if you take off the time, you can see that that's 73 years. That is why I've pointed it for you here to be able to see. Now, what this means? This is a signal for you that the imperialist system was being weakened. This is a sign for you that the system was weakened, even though they stayed controlling the world, but the system was weakened. Why? Because for 400 years, they had control over Africa's land, control over Africa's bodies, the bodies of the people. They had control over the minds of the Africans. Now, when we come to the second emancipation, it lasted shorter because the system was getting weaker and weaker. Now, what did they have during colonialism? During colonialism, they had control only over the land. They never had control over the bodies of Africans, because Africans had liberated themselves. Now, this is very important. This is very important because now we see that the system has started getting weak. So the Africans in the Gold Coast, they open a war and they start also to struggle. When Nkrumah came back to the Gold Coast in 1947, Africans had started, when you look at 1945, for example, Manchester Conference, in England, Nkrumah comes back to the Gold Coast, in 1957, and the struggle begins. And again, if you look at the period from 1945 to 1957, you see that there's a period of 12 years. Now, that is a period of 12 years. Now, I want also to send you back to the first emancipation. If you look at the first emancipation, the struggle, when it started, it also lasted for 13 years. It lasted for 13 years. What does this mean? It shows you that if you start struggling against a system of rule, of foreign rule, or an oppressive system, which is entrenched like a political economic system, we mentioned that slavery was a political economic system. Colonialism was a political economic system, which was designed to enrich the northern part of the world, the white people, the Europeans. Now, for you to remove that entrenched system, it needs a consistent struggle of 10 to 15 years on average. Because if you look at the period in the Gold Coast, you can see that they took 12 years of the struggle from 1945 to 1957, then Ghana would get independent. In Haiti, they would take from 1791 to 1804, 13 years of a struggle before they would get independence. All of you who know about Haiti, you know that Haiti got its independence in 1804. But if they take you about, to learn about how the struggle started way back in 1791. Now, this information would help us to map out the future. Now, one thing which I've not also mentioned was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. When Ghana achieved its independence in 1957, it gave impetus to the to the civil rights movement in the United States. If you remember, Dr. Martin Luther King, he was present at Ghana's independence in 1957. And then he would go to the United States back, and he would give a speech which was called The Birth of a New Nation. This was Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, in this speech, he reflected on Ghana's achievement under Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and how Ghana, a new Black nation, was birthed. This gave momentum to the civil rights movement itself, starting 1957 after Ghana had gained its independence. Now, they were able to struggle against, Jim Crow segregation in the United States. And this was apartheid in the United States, where Black people were being segregated and separated. They have their own toilets, they have their own drinking towers and stuff like that. They have their own canteens, and whites have, they were the United States, which claims that it is the king and spreader or the country of freedom, which it forces everyone to follow its ways, was oppressing our people in apartheid until 1964. Africans in the United States, or the so-called African Americans, they were not voting. Now, until 1964, that is when they signed the Civil Rights Act, which desegregated, everything in the United States, and Africans were allowed to live. Now, that was a period of struggle for all the African people. And if you remember Dr. Henrik Clark, he said that Africans, when they revolt in groups. So this is also very important. Now, when we come to the third emancipation, which we have predicted as a people who have studied history, this history, like I said, it is majorly coming from our own books, even though we have made reference to other books. But this history is majorly coming from Nkrumah's work, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, Africa Must Unite, and then another book by C.L.R. James called The Black Jacobins. When we come to the third emancipation timeline, now I want you to pay very close attention. We consider that 1966 was a very instrumental year when Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was removed from power. It was very instrumental because Nkrumah was the most formidable opponent of neocolonialism, was the most formidable fighter of neocolonialism. Nkrumah inspired Dr. King. Dr. King went back to the United States, from Ghana in 1957, went back to the United States and started struggling. He got momentum and fought for the civil rights movement. I want people, African people in the United States, to pay close attention to the sequence of these events. Now, Malcolm X also, when he visited Ghana, Malcolm X, when he went back to the United States after visiting Ghana, he went back a new person, a transformed person. That is when Malcolm X formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity to mimic the Organization of African Unity, which had been formed in Africa. These are very important. Now, Malcolm X got new information after he interacted with Nkrumah and got a new thinking. Now, Nkrumah was the most formidable opponent in the 1960s against imperialism and colonialism and white supremacy, on the planet. That is why they had to overthrow him. So that is why we consider 1966, the year he was overthrown, a very instrumental year in the struggle for liberation of the African people. Now, from 1966, if we look at it, up to 2020, I wrote this piece, which you are seeing here. This presentation, I prepared it in 2020, in the year 2020, because from 2020, after studying our history, I realized there is new things that are going on across the world, from COVID, the economic depressions in 2008, economic collapse, 2018, there was another economic collapse. So 2020, if you look at people like Robert Kiyosaki, who is a writer, many of you know him, and an investor, he mentioned that there was an economic depression in 2018, but they were trying to cover it up with the COVID, with the bringing of COVID and all things. They were covering up a lot of things, these people who control the world. Now, from 2020, there was very important things that happened during that period. So that is when I started accounting. So when I subtract 2020 from 1966, I see that there's a period of around 54 years which had lasted there. Now, if I add around 10 to 12 years, it gave me around 2033. So I said that 12 years is what we need as Africans to start organizing ourselves. Because if we do the right things, these neocolonial systems, we can overthrow it in the next 10, 12, 15 years. So by the year 2033, if we do the right things as Africans, if we organize ourselves very well, then this system we can be able to defeat. Why? Because there is certain things which have been going on. Now, we started 2020. The United States was facing a lot of problems. If you read a book like, there's a book which was written by a woman called Amy Chua, and it talks about how the United States education system had collapsed, that they are not producing engineers. China is the one producing engineers and all these. And then you can talk about the economic depressions that have been happening. And then you can talk about the rise of China. You remember the rise of China, Ray Dalio spoke about it. Also, he mentioned about 1945. I told you 1945 is when we had the Manchester Conference. Now, Ray Dalio mentioned the rise of China. These are some of the factors that are leading to the collapse of the United States. Why? Because there has been some growth in other parts which are opposed to the way the Europeans think. They want to always control the world. We have seen technology now is being led by China. Okay, when it comes to technology, when it comes to electric cars, China is the biggest producer of electric cars, as we are seeing here. Now, we will come later to explain about industrial revolutions. I'm coming to that when we are going forward, how China is leading in all technologies, to give you some more clear signs so that you can be able to understand these signs. You know, technology, clean energy, China is the one leading in communication technology. 5G came from China. It was not the United States who invented 5G. And even right now, a few days ago, they said that Huawei has come back, has been able to manufacture its own microchips. You know, Huawei and SMIC, which is a Chinese semiconductor manufacturing company, even though the United States blacklisted them and banned them from using semiconductors, they have been able to manufacture their own, and it has caused a lot of panic in the United States. Now, these are all signs, but these things, they started in 2020, and these are the signs which I was telling you, that there was this transfer of control of technology from energy, communication, and transport, and these are the parts which inform the Industrial Revolution. So the rise of China has been very instrumental also, that even though the Black people have been struggling for all these years, for the last 600 years with this system, China also came on the scene, and of course the Soviet Union in the 1940s. So all this led to weakness. That is why you see that people now, you go to Los Angeles, California, people are sleeping on the streets. So these are all the signs. People are homeless. The homeless people are increasing in the United States. You know, in Europe, you have seen protests. In France, you know, since 2020, you have seen yellow jackets. They have not been leaving, you know, the streets. Last year, you know, even this very year, people were demonstrating in France. So these are all the signs for us to be able to read and be able to understand. Now, according to Nkrumah's book called Philosophical Concisism, there's what he calls categorical conversion from a lower logical type to a higher logical type. Now, I'll explain this. These are scientific things. What he's saying is this, that to transform from an inferior system or an undesirable system, and you want to transfer to a higher system which is desirable, which is advantageous, which is good for the people, it takes some time, but you have to understand that it is possible. Now, from our calculation, we calculated that it takes around 10 to 15 years, like I said, from history. If you look at the predictions of history and how things are transformed, it takes around 10 to 15 years. So this signifies that over a period of time since 1791, imperialism has been becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. But of course, like anyone who's dying, like if you cut off a head of a chicken, you know that the chicken will become very violent. You leave it, it will become very violent as if it has gained some new strength. But then it is dying. It is dying. Just give it some time, then you will see it all of a sudden, the life going out of it. So just like, a dying chicken or a snake, it will kick around, you see. So starting with the French Revolution, in the 1700s, people took power from imperialism internally in France itself. And also because of the internal contradictions that existed within France itself, that there were these monarchs and so-called, people took power to that point, but people did not notice those ones who were controlling the world. Now, the Haitian Revolution, Haiti played an important role in the Black world, in the African world, when it defeated France. That is why it has never been forgiven, as many of you know. It has never been forgiven because of showing that the African people can fight against imperialism and win and oppression. So Haiti and the destruction of slavery took a lot of power, okay, from the imperialist system. Now, when we came to colonialism, again, these people, they invented a new system, which we mentioned already. Again, colonialism was defeated. Now, we have, again, the rise of China has compounded the problems to a system which has already been defeated. Now, we have Russia on the other side also challenging the system. As you have seen that the lies have been challenged, have been defeated. You can see that the United States wanted to attack Ethiopia recently, but they were not able to do it. Why? Because people have figured out how the system works. People were able, a group of people were able to defeat the propaganda of the BBC and CNN. You have seen that all these platforms have been weakened, that even our platforms, just like this one of Sister Shanice, can be able to reach out to many people compared to CNN. You see that we have gained that power. So you have Russia on the other side. Now you have that moderate economic growth in Africa. And of course, we have challenges in Africa, tremendous challenges. But you don't discount that we have some level of control compared to when we were in slavery and colonialism. That you don't dispute it. We have people who have businesses. We have control over, of certain level of media. We are talking to you across, you are Africans all across the world. People like Honorable Marcus Garvey did not have this power. Nkrumah did not have this. But we have, this right now. We have Africans in businesses. We have Africans all over moving. Now, we have so much power that to a certain extent, sometimes we don't realize how much power we have right now compared to our ancestors. So that moderate economic growth, and the growth in Asia has greatly affected Europe. And that is why you see that if you look at economic data right now, you can see that the major economies in Europe, they are declining. They have been in depression. Germany, they announced that it has gone in depression officially at the beginning of this year, because last year, the economy shrank, and even this year, the first quarter, it shrank. It was in depression. That means the economy was growing in negative. That is Germany. And Germany and France, they are the major economies. Now, France, again, I'm bringing you to today, is facing tremendous challenges. You have seen them in Africa. That is why France is refusing to leave Niger. They are telling them we should go. They say we will not go. It shows you that they are desperate. All these are signs. The signs have been exasperated. You see, the United States was chased from Afghanistan in 2021. Now, even before I wrote, it was after I had written all these things. You have seen the war in Ukraine that it has challenged them. So it's a lot of challenges which are going on. And of course, I've mentioned that imperialism, European imperialism now has been brought to its knees right now. So what is remaining for us as Africans? What is it that we have to do next? Because I mentioned that I wrote this in 2020. This is what I'm showing you. Now, this gentleman was speaking in 2017 in Europe. He's called he's called Eric Lee. He is a Chinese political scientist. Now, in 2017, he was predicting the end of this system that we are operating in. But he's an analyst. He's not a soothsayer or prophet, but he's an analyst also who looks at history and understands how history works. So I want you to listen to him a few seconds, and then we will go forward to the next step and be able to conclude this presentation quickly.
Beginning the Enlightenment, of course. I think we're at the end of a 300-year run of a liberal vision of the world. However you want to call it, or maybe some call it the modern. And I think that vision is in some trouble, not predicting its demise, not yet, but it's in some trouble now because in the last 30 years to this day, since the end of the Cold War, that liberals around the world have pursued a rather extreme ideological version of modern liberalism, which precludes and excludes other possibilities, both intellectually and economically, to the point where I think the leader of the liberal world, the United States, of course, had committed what Paul Kennedy defined as imperial overreach, both externally and internally. Externally, it's gone too far in trying to impose its vision on the rest of the world, on so many countries, to some extent, in some cases militarily, to rather disastrous consequences. And internally, it's taken this vision of the world which places the individual as the autonomous basic unit of society at the center of the universe. Internally, it's gone pretty far since the Reagan and Thatcher revolution with the neoliberal economic doctrine that has led to tremendous inequality in developed countries that are generating this backlash against the liberal tradition, both the liberal tradition and globalization itself. And these problems are not being solved.
Yes, so that is very important. So what he was saying, he was re-emphasizing actually what I have been analyzing from history. These people actually, when I came to know them, it is after I had read our history, and then I came to see that this is just a confirmation of what I have seen analytically through history. People like Dalio, who wrote that book, The Changing World Order, understanding and how to deal with the principles of the changing world order, principles of understanding how to deal with the changing world order. So these men were just a confirmation, the true video of the facts that had, discovered from our history. Now, what is the way forward for us as Africans? We have looked at the history and seen the history. We have seen the place where we are today. I'm running very fast because Sister Shanice is on me. The time is not on our side. So I want to make sure that I finish very quickly. So what is the way forward for us as Africans? Now, if we want to transform Africa, and of course, the transformation of Africa, like Kwame Nkrumah and Malcolm X mentioned it clearly, the transformation of Africa is the one which is going to bring the respect for Africans all across the world. This development and respect for Africa is going to be reflected on every single African person, also called the Caribbean or African American. I don't mind whatever you call yourself, but I think you are an African. It is going to be reflected in one way or the other. Now, for us to do that, we need a plan that is going to transform Africa rapidly, not the current order that is being applied right now. That is what I said, that they are running infrastructure, colonial infrastructure, political and economic. All these infrastructures are colonial and they are not designed to transform Africa. That is why they have not done so for the last 60 years. And they are still locked. The people who are running the continent right now, they are still locked in the habit of begging, in the programming. They have programmed them that they are supposed to beg for them to survive, for their people to survive. So they don't believe that what they have is enough. But we will look at the continent and see, we will see that we have enough. And if we had followed what Nkrumah said, or if we follow what Nkrumah says, or he said in the 1960s, we should be able to transform this African continent in less than a generation. Now, in his habit, Liu Zijun, who was a Chinese gentleman, he was a Chinese minister in China, and he was the pioneer actually of the Chinese high-speed railway, used to say that in order to achieve a great leap, an entire generation must be sacrificed. So it is the same thing if you are talking about, if you are talking about, freedom. for us to have freedom, Haiti had to be sacrificed. A generation of Haitians had to sacrifice themselves. A generation of Africans in Haiti had to sacrifice themselves for the next generations to get independence. Now, a generation of people from Nkrumahs, of Malcolm X, of Lumumbas had to be killed, had to sacrifice themselves for us to get, where we are, to get some relief. They had to be sacrificed. So this is what, this gentleman is talking about, that to achieve a great leap in anything, whether it is industrialization, you have to sacrifice a whole generation. So this earned him the name called Great Leap Liu, because you remember the Chinese have been talking about their high-speed rail. It started in 2009, but right now they have more than, I think, 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, more than anyone across the world combined. You can combine all the high-speed rail across the world. They can't reach the Chinese, as one country. So this is what they have been able to achieve since 2009. So this man was a great man. Now, when we talk about the plan that which we have, and we have termed the Rapid Africa Transformation Plan, is an integration of ideas, and it's going to be driven, or is being driven by Africans, ourselves, and ideas from different corners of our people who are Africans, and of course the African youth. And we are working on integrating the different groups that are going to work on this. And this idea is built on the fact that we can be able to transform Africa in 20 years. The African Union, of course, has been saying that in its Agenda 2063, that Africa by 2063, in 40 years from now, Africa will be $29 trillion. But when we look at Africa's GDP right now, which is $3.5 trillion, and now this is what we were talking about, that when leaders are programmed to think that there's nothing which they can do about their situation, they will not even notice that they have resources which are being wasted, or these resources which are being stolen. Now, when we look at Africa's economy, right now is $3.5 trillion. Now, $3.5 trillion, if you combine it, it would be actually the 50th biggest economy or 60th biggest economy in the world right now. Now, we have economies you have been hearing of G7. They are the biggest economies in the world, and they have been bullying everyone just because they are the biggest economies. If you combine Africa's economy, you should be able to have Africa as the 5th or 6th biggest economy in the world. Now, to give you an example, countries like Turkey, they are less than $1 trillion. Yet, Turkey has been summoning Africa to Turkey-Africa Summit because Turkey thinks that it's very rich. And yet its economy is around $900 billion. It's not even a trillion, but Africa's combined economy is $3.5 trillion. Now, when you go to India, India has also been summoning African leaders. Yet India's economy is almost the same size as that of Africa. But India has been summoning Africa to India-Africa Summit, and also saying that it is giving aid. India is giving aid to Africa. So this is shameful. Now, on the other side also, we see that India has developed technologically with almost the same size of economy as Africa. It is invested in trains. India is invested in roads, is invested in a lot of technology right now that is going on in India. Things are progressing at rapid rates. India, even to a certain extent, India came and bought the company which makes Range Rovers, the so-called Land Rover. An Indian company called Tata came and bought this British company called the Range Rover or Land Rover. It bought it, so it is owned by Indians. But now, how could Indians be able to do this? Indians are going to the moon. Recently, just a few weeks ago, Indians landed on the moon. Africa has not even put one satellite, a single satellite on the moon. Yet our economy is the same size with that of India. And, and even we are better than India, that we have a continent which is 12 times larger than that of India. So we have much more resources compared to India. Now, we sat down and realized that there's a problem here. It is the misuse of these resources that is causing a problem. There's disorganization on our continent. And we have to go back to Nkrumah's thinking. Nkrumah says that we unify the continent and then we start the reconstruction, but we cannot start a reconstruction without unifying the continent. Now, this is what Nkrumah was talking about. So we are saying that we can be able to rebuild Africa to $65 trillion. $65 trillion. Now, $65 trillion in 20 years, if you have a population, if your population has grown to 2.5 billion people, including the diaspora, of course, we have in the diaspora more than around 700 million people. If you add that to Africa, let us assume that our population has reached maybe 2.5 billion people or even 3 billion people in 20 years, our GDP could be around $20,000 with an economy of $65 trillion, okay? Now, to give you an example, the United States right now, its economy, the GDP per capita of the United States is $80,000. Okay, so what we are suggesting is very much possible. Now, to give you this a little bit more so that you can be able to understand, today, Gabon's economy, the GDP per capita is $10,000. So Gabon alone as a country and Equatorial Guinea, which we have spoken about here already, they have actually achieved what we are talking about, half of it. They have achieved half of what we are talking about, because 3 billion people, Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, $65 trillion, that is a GDP per capita of $20,000, just $20,000. It is not even half, of the United States GDP per capita. Okay, so this is very possible. This is very possible if our $3.5 trillion GDP right now is used as base, the initial investment, and our economy is growing at a rate of 15.6%. That is what we need. We need a growth rate of 15.6% per annum every year, 15.6. And in 20 years, we can be able to transform our economy to $65 trillion. And we could be at the top there competing with the biggest economies in the world. And this is possible. You have seen the transformation of Dubai here. You have seen in less than 15 years, you have seen the transformation of countries like Saudi Arabia. In less than 15 years, they have done it. Look at countries which were deserts, they have been able to transform. So this is very possible. Now, what do we need? We need to build it in an African way, contrary to, to what others are doing. We don't want to build a society whereby we have a trillionaire or somebody owning 200 billions, and then you have other people living on the street. The African principle of Ubuntu doesn't allow that. It doesn't, because it says, the African principle of Ubuntu says, I am because we are, we are because I am. Now we take care of others. So that is where we looked at our ancestors and we look at what Nkrumah is talking about. Nkrumah is talking about in his book, Africa Must Unite. He's talking about African, philosophical consensusism. So this is where we go to dig what is Honorable Marcus Garvey talking about. What are our ancestors like Robert Sobukwe, in South Africa, are they talking about? What is George Padmore talking about? Okay, what are our ancestors talking about? All of them. They are talking about Ubuntuism. We are a communal people. We are, others can call it scientific socialism. So regardless of what you call it, this is about having everyone comfortable, that no one lives on the street, no one, is lacking anything. So these as our guiding ideologies, can be the guiding principles upon which we build, a new society. So this is a different philosophy based on African culture, and then rethinking the systems and re-engineering the processes that are running our society. Then we can talk about a unified industrial strategy, and use local entrepreneurs and labor as drivers, build high-speed trains on the continent, build highways. But we cannot do this. We cannot do this if we don't unify the African continent. And that is what we are working on. And we have, organizations which were started by my brother, Kabbalah, the Africa Continental Unity Party. We want to use this as a driving force. This, I did not form it, but this is my brother we met, and then we discussed and we say, we can drive this thing in a different way and bring all the people who have all these ideas. We have Professor Annington, he has ideas. We can bring him on board and let us organize these resources. What we realize is that there's lack of organization of these resources. Now, however much you have resources, but if those resources are not organized, then that is the problem where it is. And that is the pandemic or epidemic which Africa is facing. The disorganization, everyone is going in different direction. Everyone is running in different direction. Now, what we want is to reorganize those resources and refocus them. Because when Nkrumah was talking about the unification of Africa, he was simply talking about the reorganization of Africa's resources. Now, why is this possible? We have seen that Africa, you talk about, for example, Democratic Republic of Congo, it has a stock of more than $38 trillion of resources in the ground on the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, we have not spoken about the other African countries. You go to Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe alone, they say around the resources in the ground are alone, without the agricultural land, Zimbabwe alone around $18 trillion. So if you take Africa's stock of valuable raw materials alone, you have around 300 to 700 trillion dollars. That is the African continent. Talk about oil, talk about tantalum, talk about manganese, talk about iron ore, talk about agriculture. So only the material resources, you should have around 300 to 700 trillion dollars. With our population of 1.7 billion people, including the diaspora, you have a literacy rate of around 75 to 80%. That is the literacy rate. So what is it that you lack? You don't lack anything. You have the material resources. Now you have the capital, the GDP of $3.5 trillion. I have not even mentioned the money which belongs to the diaspora, which is a lot of money. That could push Africa's economy even to be the fourth or the third if you put the money owned by the African diaspora. Now, you put together those material resources you have in the ground, you put together your GDP, now you put together the literacy rate, you have a population, you already have the market. There's nothing you need but rather to reorganize these resources. So it is possible. Now, why is it possible in 20 years? We have seen that the time for developing nations has reduced. If you want to develop a nation right now, the time has been reduced. You look at Europe, for example, it took them 600 years because the technology during that period was infant. The United States itself, it has taken them more than 300 years. Why? The technology was still infant. Now, but you look at Singapore, China, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and others in the Middle East, many of them have taken less than 40 years to transform their economies. You look at China, for example, since 1949, before it stabilized. Some of them have taken less than 40 years. In Dubai and all these, I've shown you that some of them have transformed themselves in less than 20 years. So this is why this is very possible. It is very possible. What we have to do is only to reorganize our resources. Now, again, this is possible because what we are going through right now in this so-called third industrial revolution, contrary to what people have been telling you that we are going through the fourth industrial revolution, it is not true. This so-called fourth industrial revolution was started by this guy called Schwab, the one who was the founder of the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum. Strauss Schwab is called Strauss Schwab. Is the one who started that narrative that we are in the in the fourth industrial revolution, and he's the one who has been saying that you own nothing and be and be happy. So this is a liar. This is a man who's a liar. But there's a gentleman who's called Jeremy Rifkin, and I've put the link also. I've put a link also here. You can copy it. You have the video. You can pause it and copy this link, or you can even type it in your computer and take it. Jeremy Rifkin has said that we are going through the third industrial revolution right now. Why? Because when an industrial revolution is happening, there's three forces which come together. And I want you to pay close attention to this. The three forces which come together, they are the energy. There's energy transformation, the transformation in the energy industry. There's transformation in the transport industry, and there's transformation in the communication industry. Now, these three all come together and they converge. And any country which is leading in these three technologies is the one which will be able to take the world into the next industrial revolution. Now, let us go to Britain, for example, and understand what was the means of energy in Britain in the first industrial revolution, because the first industrial revolution happened in Britain. It was steam. Steam was the source of energy. Remember the trains, they were driven by steam. Now, what was the means of transport? It was the train itself, and of course the horse and buggy. And what was the communication means? They used to use the telegram. This was the means. So when these technologies came together, the industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution happened in Britain. Now, the second industrial revolution, very quickly, let me take you to the United States where it happened. What happened in the United States? The invention of the automobile as a means of transport, the discovery of oil as a means of energy. All this happened in the United States, the discovery of refining oil. And what again? It was the telephone, which happened in the United States. All these three technologies came together and they formed the second industrial revolution. Now, contrary to what we have been telling you with what is happening right now, that is the fourth industrial revolution, it's not a fourth industrial revolution. What has been happening is the advance in the telecommunication industry. Now, what we are going to see today, what we are going through today, what you are hearing, renewable energy. The country which is going to be leading in renewable energy is going to be the new superpower. And which country across the world do you see that is leading in the manufacture, for example, of wind turbines, of solar panels, and all this energy, and is putting up more nuclear power plants and dams? It has the biggest dams, hydropower dams. It is China. Now, the new means of transport. What is the new means of transport? Is electric cars. And who is leading this? It is China. The high-speed trains, who's leading this? It is China. Now, this takes you back to what I was analyzing, the history and understanding the patterns of history and the modern emancipation timelines. Now, the third means of communication for an industrial revolution to happen, which I'm calling the third industrial revolution right now, as according to Jeremy Rifkin, who has written even a book called The Third Industrial Revolution. The third technology is the communication technology. And who invented the 5G technology and who's leading in the 5G technology? It is China. Now, I want you to understand, when experts are talking, not people because they formed the World Economic Forum and they come out and say things and they say you are in the fourth industrial revolution and you believe it. Do not believe it. These people have a hidden agenda. Now, China is the one who's leading in all these directions. So this shows you that the timing is very right for Africa to be able to start doing the right thing. Now, when you listen to Jeremy Rifkin, he has said that Africa, it is possible for it to leapfrog everyone, because he's an American man, but when he was in the United States and he gave them these ideas, they did not listen to him. So he took his ideas to Europe and he took some of his ideas to Britain, to China. So the Chinese prime minister or premier, when he heard about this book, he said they should buy that book and bring it to China. So they brought the book called The Third Industrial Revolution, and the Chinese premier told his people to start implementing what is in that book. So that book is very important. People can go out and read it. Now, he said that it is possible for Africa to leapfrog everyone. Why? Because Africa, before we entered the era of telephones, for example, before we had banks, we didn't have banks penetrating all of the African continent. We were transferring money on phones before anyone else in the world. Even when you go to the United States, the transfer of money using phones is not common. So Africans had a mobile bank in their houses before anyone else across the world. That's why you see there was the invention of M-Pesa, in Africa, and mobile transfer before anywhere, even in the United States, it had, before it had happened there. So this is the very reason why it is possible, to transform Africa and leapfrog, what we call the leapfrog, or the rapid advancement, or to what Lee, the Chinese, minister, railway minister, called the leap, the great leap. To cause a great leap, you need to do, you need to sacrifice a whole generation. So what are we doing now? Right now, we are engaged in a lot of activities, like coordinating all these organizations. Like I said, I belong to an organization called the Connect Africa, and our work is majorly to connect those parts that are supposed to do this work. You know, people like Professor Annington of the Rapid Africa Plan, and what we are transforming right now into the Rapid Africa Transformation Plan. We have the Africa Continental Unity Party, and then all the other elders. So we are putting these forces together. That is our work, which we are currently engaged in. We have a campaign right now that is going on, which is called Connect, Boycott Colonial Businesses on Twitter. You can put in that and you will find it. So you move that tweet, you help us, because that is a big campaign. Of course, the Africa Must Unite Now campaign also is part of it. And the boycott colonial businesses is just mainly aimed at boycotting any colonial businesses that you can boycott, in your side to benefit Africans. You go in a supermarket, you take goods and look at them, you see that they are from Europe or the United States, you don't buy those goods, okay? If you see that this is made in France, why? Because these countries are in Africa, they are oppressing our people. France especially has refused to, to leave the continent. So this is solidarity with the African people and all African people across the world that are being, exploited. Whether it is petrol stations, we have, Total petrol stations in Africa, and they belong to France. They have been exploiting our oil and stealing all the resources. So these businesses need to be boycotted. So you help us to move that hashtag all across Twitter. If you search for it, or you search my name, Kwame Gonza, you'll find me on Twitter. So these are some of the things which we are engaged in, and some of other things I will not say them here because they are still in the background. We are working on them in the background. Sister Shanice here has given us this platform. We are also working with her and all the other groups. That is why I say you should try and share the channel, and then let us support each other. Let us build that network, that strong network that will be able to transform the continent. So these are the works which I have I've been using for this presentation. The Black Jacobin, CLR James, you can see him there. Kwame Nkrumah, Africa Must Unite. The Third Industrial Revolution, Jeremy Rifkin. Ray Dalio, you can see the book there. Principles, principles for dealing with the changing world order. Why nations succeed and nations fail. He's talking about the failure of the United States and how it is declining. I mentioned for you the Third Industrial Revolution and how China is leading it, how it is taking the world into the Third Industrial Revolution. I mentioned for you the the breakthrough in chips, which the United States has put sanctions on China. I mentioned for you the electric, cars. China is the one who was leading. Data came back, last month that China bypassed it, Japan as the biggest supplier and producer and exporter of electric cars or vehicles generally. China right now is the one leading. Last year, it bypassed, Germany to take the second spot as the biggest producer of vehicles. You have not seen, Chinese vehicles yet. Maybe probably some of you are traveling in some, vehicles like, Volvo. They belong to China right now. I read from Conservatism, Nkrumah's Conservatism, and then there is the book called The Route Act, which was written by, Dr. And Professor Huntington Mobaiwa. Conservatism was written by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So once again, my name is Kwame Gonza. I'm the Director of Operations of Connect Africa and the pioneer of Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. So that is the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. As you know, Africa is integrating, and it was talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But one of the problems which the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has is the issue of transport, that to transport goods from one part of the continent to the other, you need transport, but we don't have that means. That you have to use air to transport goods from east to west or from west to south. So we understand that the railway is one of those cheapest means of transport, even across the world, that can be adopted. So that is why we came up with the Africa Railway Triangle Network Master Plan. So anyone who is there and loves Africa and loves the African people can reach out to us, and then we can see how we can share ideas and we can work together. You have access to different organizations. You have access to different groups and bodies of the African Union, the diaspora, people who have that ability and they are passionate about our people. You can reach out to us, and then we can have these conversations. I want to thank you very much, all of you who have been watching. I had to go through it very quickly because Sister Shanice is on me. I've already used up my time. But I want to thank you once again and continue to support the channel, share this channel, and invite others to watch. These are our platforms. These are our Pan-African platforms. And so it is where we should spread the African narrative and our own ideas as Africans, since all the other people are very much interested in sharing their ideas and even sometimes forcing their narrative on us. So support this platform. When you support this platform, then you are supporting all Africans across the world and you are spreading the African narrative. Thank you very much, Sister Shanice, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone who's watching the channel. I'm really glad to be here.
We thank you so much, Brother Kwame. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, you packed so much into that presentation. We were talking at 100 miles an hour just so that you could get all the information that was painted up inside of you out to us. And, you know, what you have outlined there is so important. I know our Brother Kwame never has enough time to present when we do the panel. So today we're going to give him the entire show, and he still could have done with more time which would have enabled him to elaborate on all of what you were saying there. Absolutely phenomenal journey. And I'm sure everyone in the chat thinks so as well. I just want to quickly go over to the chat. No, I wasn't hurrying you at all. I was just chillaxing back here, but I was thinking it'd be less time for Q&A. And I know, you know, ideally you want time to answer questions. So yeah, we've got some new people who've joined us in the house. Brother Kwame Aboje is in the house. Welcome. Let us know if you have any questions for our brother Kwame Gonza, our presenter for today. We have been on a 500-year journey from the past and projected into the future. And I think, you know, there's so much that stood out for me in all of what you said there, beloved. And I think what I'm really excited about is the importance for us to acknowledge what you were saying in terms of the transformational plan. And also, very importantly, though, the timeline. And to make us all realize, as much as we want change, there was never a situation where it happened overnight. Even the coups that we're seeing happening now, from a Pan-Africanist perspective, that's come about after decades of actually doing the Pan-Africanism work on the ground, politicizing issues that are impacting on Africa, and having come to the fore some very powerful, outspoken speakers, you know, who have fearlessly called out, you know, the exploiters for who they are and for what they're doing. And so it hasn't just happened overnight. It's been a process, a long process, and a huge amount of effort and sacrifice. And we need to keep up the momentum. We need to keep up with the momentum because they are already planning 20 years, 30 years in advance. As I said to you, I came across a YouTube video that was sent to me, or I don't know if it was TikTok or one of those, but I got it via WhatsApp. And, you know, the video was talking about a laboratory that is actually growing hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. They're incubating, mosquitoes. And they've injected these mosquitoes with some kind of, who knows, it could be a biological weapon. They say, you know, it's to take out the mosquitoes that cause dengue and all these other fevers. So they're targeting Africa with these mosquitoes. So they're saying, oh, these are the mosquitoes that have caused all these different diseases, malaria, dengue, and other. And so we have tainted with the DNA of these mosquitoes so that, you know, they will go into the environment, poison all of the mosquitoes out there. Do they not even begin to think of how that's going to impact the ecosystem? I mean, these people who have got the power to release, you know, mosquitoes in our country are a serious threat to all of us. So whilst we are struggling and we're organizing for our liberation and our total independence, whilst we were doing all the work that we need to do to overcome, you know, the clutches of the mental enslavement and everything else, we've got to also be mindful that we need a powerful defense system to defend us from biological attack, from the weather manipulation weapons that they've got that they've been using on Haiti, and recently with all the fires that have been started around the world. As you said, when people are going down and their heads cut off like that chicken, they are dangerous at that time. And these people are not going to go out without a fight. And as you've mentioned, you know, some of the largest exploiters of oil on the continent are the Americans, the Canadians, and the French and the likes. Yeah, and so it is a multi-trillion-pound industry for them. And even if we home in on just one product that they get from Africa, it's going to go into the billions. You know, so serious times, serious times. To everyone in the chat, wow, we are 4 minutes away from the top of the hour. It's been a marathon one. I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, please do give us a thumbs up. You know, I really need your support. They've been shadow banning me for a while, family. They are shadow banning this site. I might have to start up a new station because too many people are saying I'm not coming up on their feed. They're not getting information to say that I've gone live. Too many people. And so, and they're restricting, I can see from the analytics and the reach that they're restricting the countries that my videos go to as well. A large segment of my audience has always been on the continent of Africa. And in recent videos, I'm seeing that they're restricting the videos from actually reaching Africa. So it'll just never come up. So I need you to assist us, family, in circulating these videos until I get a new one set up. So to everybody in the house, let me see if I can bring out a question before we do go. And brother D, DD's in the house, absolutely fantastic. I think I did see Orbia Money and else as well. Welcome, welcome, CNS in the house. Greetings, greetings, good to have you in the house. Oh, Sister Afrijamo, as always, Brother Mandele. Oh, it's awesome. Who else did I see in the house that I haven't seen for a little while? I thought, oh, Lord, good to have them in the house. I think it was Orbia Man, but there's somebody else as well. So rise up, each and every one of you, all of my regular audience participants, my proactive, dynamic audience participants, rise up. Thank you for rising up, Brother Kwame as well. Let's see if we've actually got any questions for you. So Travel Light, welcome, says, how can the diaspora get involved? Oh, I think you might have missed the very beginning of the show when we was talking about people like CLR James and George Padmore, you know, who were the political advisors to some of these leaders, because, you know, our unique position is we cut across all of the different individual African nations, clans, tribes, and everything else, and we have that global Pan-Africanist perspective. But the beautiful thing is that a lot of the young people are growing up now with that global Pan-Africanist perspective, and we just love that. But let me, Queen Mother More, welcome, welcome. Hey, Kritza Flower, welcome. Yes, you're saying they're restricting my videos. Yes, they are. Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to be a knuckle angry for them. Brother Kwame Bonza, you know, you've been asked a question, and it may be something that you've pondered over that you think you would like to elaborate on. How can the diaspora get involved in helping to bring about the changes that we want to see so that Africa can leapfrog into the next century? We are 1 minute away from the top of the hour, so you've got 30 seconds.
Yes, so I think there is also another person who asked, would Nkrumah and Lumumba be happy with the situation of the continent? Of course, they will not be happy. That is why we are also here and we are acting on it. Like we started, we spoke about the fact that Nkrumah said he gave us the work, who act as the guide. So that work of Nkrumah and all the ancestors is right now working as the guide to the next generation of people. So don't underestimate what you are capable of as yourself. The diaspora can be engaged in the work, you know, in any way. Connect Africa, we have a website called connecttoafrica.org. I think Sister Shanice will put it in the chat section. Everyone can go in there. Connect to Africa, or I'll put it myself because I'm already on there. Yes, Connect to Africa. .org. So connect to africa.org. That is the channel. You can reach out to us there. There's Africa Continental Unity Party.com. Also, that is another channel whereby this is one of the organizations we are working together with to be able to build a mass movement. One of the things which Nkrumah spoke about is that people have to have a party which they belong to in order for them to be mobilized well and directed to direct that energy. So we are working together with the Africa Continental Unity Party. You can go to SCUP. Even when you type it in Google, you will see it, Africa Continental Unity Party. Or you can type Connect Africa. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us, everywhere. Connect Africa 56. That is our email. You can reach out to us, and then we can discuss and show you some of the programs which we are engaged in. So it's a lot of things that we are working on different spaces where you can be engaged in contributing. Yeah, so ideas are very much welcome, and these are the very important, the very best, the most important things actually. They are ideas, even besides all the other help that we can speak of. So we can share ideas and see how we can build both in the diaspora and on the continent, in the motherland. Sister Shanice mentioned here already, Nkrumah was working with George Padmore. George Padmore was the advisor of Nkrumah. Almost he was the mentor, like we said, he was Nkrumah's mentor,
So we mustn't
everything he was doing.
underestimate
Yes, but they never knew that they would even be in government when they were in Manchester and they were organizing over there, they were talking. They never knew that in 10 years they're going to be in government.
Well, let me predict, Brother Kwame, that in 10 years' time, you will be in government, and we look forward
that is what we want to do. That is what we want to do. That is what we want to do. Because we have the history guiding us. So that is what we want to do, and to be able to build the continent in a different way.
I certainly hope that I live to see the day, beloved, because I see a formidable leader in you and many other young people that have been coming across this platform. We're over time now, but it's been an absolute pleasure and an absolute joy to have you address the audience today. To everybody, all of our dynamic, fantastic, blacktastic people in the audience, thank you so, so much. Stay tuned. Next strong, we've got our beloved Leo Mohammed in the house. He's going to be joining us with another powerful message. So make sure you join us next strong to hear from the brother. And Brother Kwame, we will be inviting you back. Take care, beloved. More strength, more power, more voodoo. More voodoo power to everybody in the chats. And let's keep rising up Africa, because Africa is rising. We have a job to do during these times. And what are weird things that look sweet right now, but we can't get complacent. Take care, family. One love.